They didn't call for help from us, but we were the ones who answered. The transmission came from the edge of the Persean abyss, a garbled, half-screamed plea ripped apart by stellar radiation and fear. It wasn't meant for humans. It wasn't even in a human language, but deep in the crusted silence of Earth's last orbital bastion. The signal found a listener. Ava Roslin, commander of the Revenant fleet, listened to it over and over. Behind her, the Earth hung like a bruised memory, the last blue fragment of a world torn and rebuilt through fire. It had taken 100 years for humanity to crawl, back from the brink wars, from the ash of drowned continents and the silence of extinct cities. But Ava knew the stars never forgot the ones who once screamed into them. She stood in the glass chamber at the heart of the Icarus Vow, watching the cracked moon drift beyond the viewport. It was quiet now, too quiet for a species that once roared through galaxies like wildfire. "Loop it again," she said. Her voice was low, tired, and dangerous. The technician beside her hesitated. "Ma'am, it's not ours. Some Xeno kind of emergency signal. Could be centuries old." Ava didn't blink. "Doesn't matter, because in that scream, through the distortion and alien harmonics, she'd heard something not meant to be heard. Desperation, and maybe, just maybe, guilt. The signal bore a galactic timestamp. 3 days old, real time, and that was enough. Once, humanity had been dreamers. Now, it was something else. The Revenant fleet had been built in secret orbitals, its shipyards forged from hollowed-out asteroids and the bones of old World War hulks. Earth's governments had fractured long ago, but the fleet served something deeper, a memory, a rage buried under silence. 50 ships, all black steel, silent drives, and vengeance hard-coded into their cores. It wasn't a defense fleet. It was a punishment. Ava's personal command ship, Icarus Vow, carried a command bridge surrounded by relics from Earth's darkest days, a melted reactor rod from Chernobyl, a bullet casing from World War III, a scorched helmet from the lunar riots, not trophies, warnings. A young pilot entered the chamber. "Commander Roslin, we've parsed the signal's origin. Deep sector, grid Zeta 71. No human colonies, no known alien allies. Closest matches, the Kelrati spiral." Ava narrowed her eyes. Kelrati, old name, older enemy. They were one of the first species humanity ever encountered. Their empire spanned over 100 systems once. Now, just whispers, a few lingering satellites, and occasional patrol ships sighted near dead worlds. They'd gone silent decades ago, after the last skirmishes over mining rights in the Lyra expanse. And now they were calling for help. She leaned forward, resting her hands on the holotable, her voice cold and absolute. "Bring the fleet to full burn. We jump in 12 hours. The pilot blinked. "Commander, we don't even know what's happening out there. This could be a trap." Ava's gaze never wavered. Then let it be, because deep in her blood, she remembered what the Kelrati had done. Her grandfather, Commodore Elias Roslin, had died holding the line at Vega 6, where the Kelrati had cracked open human vessels with magnetic imploders and left the survivors adrift, screaming in vacuum. She was only 6 when she watched that transmission. His final words were burned into her mind. "If we burn, let them remember who lit the fire." And now they were the ones screaming? No, she didn't believe in mercy. She believed in memory. 12 hours later, the Revenant fleet began its silent burn across the Black Sea. No music, no ceremony, just pulse-speaking confirmations and the hum of war-forged engines. Ava stood on the forward deck, her hand on the railing. She whispered, "To the stars, you cried for help, so here we come." As the fleet neared the edge of Kelrati space, long-range sensors began feeding in fractured visuals. Dead planets, stations cracked open like eggs, atmospheres burning, and something else, motion. Ava's tactical officer stiffened. "Commander, we're detecting massive heat blooms, multivector traces, unknown origin, non-Kelrati design." Ava turned slowly. On screen, what flickered to life wasn't warships. It was something darker, shadow-like constructs, as large as moons, drifting on void engines, silent, absorbing starlight, devouring power signatures. One of them moved, and the last signal from the Kelrati homeworld spiked, a screaming chorus of 1 billion voices as a world was swallowed whole. Ava's voice fell to a whisper. What the hell did they wake up? They called them Eaters of Collapse, not by name, no. These things had none, no language, no broadcast, no sign of life, just the evidence they left behind. Systems reduced to heat-dead husks, orbital rings falling like ash, and signals that screamed until they turned into static. The Kelrati had cried out too late. Now, their civilization was gone. Eva Roslin stood frozen as the last transmission ended. A top-down orbital scan of the Kelrati capital breaking apart. Continental plates buckling outward as the planet's core detonated from within. One frame showed millions of heat signatures. Fleeing, fighting, burning. Then Black, her tactical officer, Lieutenant Corden Vale, turned from the screen, pale beneath the flickering lights. It wasn't a bombardment. They weren't destroyed from the outside. Eva's voice was calm, but cold. What then? He hesitated. It looked like their world imploded. The crust was hollowed out. Extracted. Extracted for what? He didn't answer. The Icarus vow floated at the edge of the massacre. The rest of the Revenant fleet held formation behind her, war-hardened ships trained on empty space. Though they all felt it now, that presence, the heavy silence of something vast and watching. And then the shadows moved, dozens of them. No engines, no signatures, just shapes sliding through the stars like predators beneath black water. Not ships, not creatures, machines. Ava's eyes narrowed. Skin again. Focus on structure. Can't. Vale murmured. Our sensors bounce off them. They aren't reflecting anything. There, consuming the scans from a distant battleship, the Ferrum Lance, a transmission broke through. Jag was static. They're behind us. Deck breaches, magnetic collapse, holes folding in, then silence. The ship vanished from the fleet's tactical grid. Gone. Not exploded. Erased. Panic rippled through the bridge. Voices shouted over each other. Orders, coordinates, calls to fall back. But Ava didn't flinch. Not yet. Because she was watching the playback from the Ferrum Lance, slowing it down. Frame by frame, one of the black shapes had moved across the ship's flank. Just a flicker of distortion, like space cracking, and then the ship's armor began to fold inward. Not crushed by force, but rewritten, molecules rearranged, whole plating turning to ash. Not weaponry, physics itself being rewritten. Her blood ran cold. Those aren't warships, she said. There's something worse. Back in her quarters, Ava sat alone. Old scars pulsed beneath her uniform, a plasma burn along her ribs, a shattered shoulder rebuilt with synth bone. But they eked less than the memory burning in her mind. Her brother, Leon, he was the one who taught her to fly, taught her to fight. They'd escaped Earth's collapse together, running supplies to irradiated cities, pulling survivors out of orbital collapse zones. But during the Kelrati raids, he'd volunteered for the final counterstrike. His ship never returned. Ava had buried the grief beneath iron, buried it in the steel bones of the fleet. But tonight, it clawed back to the surface. She reached into a small drawer and pulled out his old data pen, scorched, half-burned, the last thing they ever found of his. Leon, she whispered, if you saw what I saw today, you'd say we shouldn't run. The fleet council would call for retreat. She knew it. Politicians still pretending Earth could stay hidden while stars burned. But that wasn't humanity. That wasn't her. Aboard the command bridge, the Admiralty convened via holographic link. Flickering visages of gray-haired strategists and cold-eyed analysts. One of them, Admiral Sarek, Terran Defense Oversight, leaned forward. This threat is beyond engagement parameters. They erased an entire empire. We fall back, warn the colonies, and build shields. Ava looked at him like he'd spat on her boots. They cried for help. Sarek, we answered. We don't run now. They were Kelrati. Enemies once. Let them burn. They were people, she growled. And whatever killed them is still out there. Sarek sneered. So what do you propose? Commander, suicide. Ava stood tall. I propose we make first contact the only way humans ever have, with fire and fury. We hit them hard. Find out what they bleed. You want a war? No, she said, but I'll bring one if it means Earth doesn't in the same way. A long silence. Then one voice crackled through the calm. Admiral Nix Rail of Mars Outer Navy. I support Commander Roslin. We've seen the shadows too, at Jupiter's edge. If we don't stop them now, we never will. One by one, heads nodded. The vote passed. The war had begun. Back on the observation deck, Ava watched as the Revenant fleet reconfigured. Formations tightened. Weapons powered up. And across the stars, the black shapes began moving again, slower now, as if curious. They'd Felt humanity's decision, Ava whispered, "You should have stayed in the dark." In the end, it wasn't a missile that struck first. It was a signal, a concentrated burst of high-energy neutrino code fired from the Icarus Valve's primary ray, riding the gravity well of a nearby star. It didn't carry a message, it carried defiance, and the galaxy heard it. The first battle didn't have a name. No planet nearby, no station to witness. Just silence and stars as the Revenant fleet faced the approaching void constructs. Black leviathans gliding like tombstones across the dark. They didn't attack. Not at first. Ava stood at the center of the command bridge, armored in matte black exosynthetic plating. Her eyes locked on the growing shapes ahead. Targeting arrays locked, Vale reported, but no life signs. No emissions. They don't even move unless we do. They're watching, Ava said. The fleet was ready. Each ship bristled with kinetic mass drivers, magnetolance artillery, and dark matter lances designed to carve through hardened planetary cores. But Ava wasn't interested in caution. She was interested in answers. Fire all forward weapons. She ordered. No warnings. Let's see if they're real. The sky lit up. Hundreds of kinetic rounds ripped through vacuum, trailed by streams of plasma fire. A trio of dark matter lances fired in unison, cutting long scars across space-time. One of the constructs took the hit, staggered slightly. No shields, no countermeasures, and then it reacted. The edges of the shape peeled back, folding in on themselves like blooming obsidian petals. Beneath the armor, or skin, or shell, something glowed, pulsing red-gold veins running through a black lattice. Like artificial muscle stretched over impossible geometry, it opened its maw and screamed. Not sound, a frequency, a raw, planetary deep frequency that cracked the Valve's front arrays and sent 3 escort frigates into emergency shutdown. Lights burst. Ears bled. Vale screamed, clutching his head. It's not sound. It's memory. It's forcing something in. Ava's knuckles turned white on the railing. She gritted her teeth against the pressure, like a hand, trying to crush her thoughts. She fought back with the only thing she had, a face. Leon's face. The scream faltered. Just enough. Fire again, she barked. While it's breathing, this time. The rounds hit deeper. One of the shadow constructs shuddered and then exploded from within, venting spirals of black ash into the void. Its body buckled inward like paper in a flame. A cheer rippled across the fleet's comms. They could bleed. They could die. Humanity had its proof. Back in the hangar bays, something even more dangerous was awakening. The Valkyria wings, pilots in sealed dropsuits, neural linked to their interceptor craft, the fastest machines ever built by human hands. They had names like Judgment Echo, Shardwing, Vanna 13, and at the center of them all, Lieutenant Alara Ken. She stood beneath her gleaming black strike craft, locking the final seals on her flight suit. Her voice crackled through the fleet-wide. "Link, time to show these nightmares what humans dream of." Ava keyed in from the bridge. "Stay fast. Don't go near their core if they open. Aim for the lattice. That's where they crack." Alara grinned inside her helmet. "Copy that, ma'am. Let's go make first contact." The launch tubes ignited, like black arrows lit with fire. The Valkyries flew, in space. The dance of death began. Alara's squadron weaved between shifting debris and gravimetric anomalies as the void constructs. Retaliated, beams of spatial distortion lanced out, not lasers, but folds in reality, ripping ships from one place to another. Valkyria Van 9 vanished mid-roll, reappearing half a click away with its cockpit filled with frost. Dead, but Alara kept flying. Her mind burned with adrenaline and memory. Her mother, killed in the orbital blackout above Caracas. Her friends lost during the Martian famine. These things weren't just enemies. They were the silence behind every human scream. She dove. Beneath one construct's curling flank, locked in coordinates. It launched a grav spike into its exposed red lattice. It howled, this time not as a scream, but as a shock wave that bent light and cracked glass. Alara gritted her teeth, broke off, and watched as the behemoth collapsed in on itself, warping like a dying sun. To down, she panted. Thousands to go. In the battle's aftermath, the silence returned. 2 constructs destroyed, 5 ships damaged, dozens dead, but they'd held. And something had changed. The remaining void constructs retreated, not like animals, like tacticians, learning. Ava watched the data feed stream across her console. The constructs had begun mirroring human formations. One had even fired a counterpulse mimicking the Valkyria launch burst, though it had failed. They weren't just machines. They were evolving. I want every log reviewed, Ava ordered. I want to know how they think, what they adapt to. Because we're not done yet. Vale turned to her, voice soft. Ma'am, we lit a spark today. Ava didn't smile. She only stared at the fading contrails where the enemy had vanished. Then let's see what catches fire next. They came back 3 days later. Not dozens this time, hundreds. The constructs emerged from the folds of deep space, like phantoms breaching as storm flickers on gravitational scans. Each one shaped slightly different than before, sharper, faster, reflecting human tactics, but twisted through an alien logic. This was no counterattack. This was evolution in motion, multiple contacts, all vectors. Vale shouted from tactical, sweat beating down his temple. They're in tight wedge formations copying our fleet spears. Range, 70,000. Clicks and closing. On the bridge of the Icarus Vow, Eva Roslin leaned forward. Her expression was stone. Hold formations. Valkyries, launching defensive arcs. Focus on the lattice, hit them before they shift. I commander, came Alara Ken's voice over comms, but even her usual confidence was tempered with dread. This was different. The first fight had been a test. This was the answer. In the black expanse, the void came alive. Enemy constructs flowed forward like an avalanche of black steel, their hulls now lined with mirrored channels designed to fracture incoming rounds. They learned. The kinetic strikes that once pierced their armor now ricocheted. Their cores no longer pulsed red gold, but shimmered with a void light that shimmered like human neural fire. They'd taken something from the first battle, memories, code, souls. Ships exploded in the opening volley. Fahrenheit buckled under gravitic pressure and split apart. Ash Runner managed to ram its target before disintegrating. Buying seconds, but seconds weren't enough. On the bridge, Ava watched her command screen light up with casualty reports. So many names, people, not units. Pulled back. Admiral Sarek's voice cut across the secure channel. The panic barely concealed. We weren't ready for this. We need to retreat, Ava responded without turning. You can run. We'll hold the line. Sarek spat. That's suicide. No, she said. It's a message. She switched channels to fleet-wide. This is Commander Roslin. We face an enemy that does not sleep, that does not fear, and that learns every time we bleed. So we're going to bleed on purpose. She looked to Vale. Initiate protocol Hecate. He hesitated. That's not tested. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to hurt them. Vale slammed his palm on the control deck. Hecate online. Across the fleet. Dozens of specialized payload bays open. From them dropped decoy drones. Swarms of microbursts trailing unstable radiation signatures. Hecate was a human invention. Born of desperation, warping field harmonics to fake ship profiles. Confuse enemy targeting, and overload short-range AI logic. The effect was immediate. 10 enemy constructs shifted toward phantom signals, breaking formation. Ava's eyes burned. Now, drive the real strike straight through. Valkyria wings cut in Alara's squadron, moving at speeds that blurred the stars. They darted through enemy lines, planting mag spikes and fusion charges into the glowing joints of confused constructs. 1, 2, 3 kills in under 20 seconds. But the victory came at a cost. Valkyria 3 detonated mid-spin. Van 11 screamed, as her hull was reverse twisted inside out in a flash of alien retaliation. Alara's voice cut through the comms. Can vow we made a dent, but we're losing too many. Ava didn't flinch. Stay in the fight, Lieutenant. Buy me 60 more seconds. Deep in the belly of the Icarus Vow, humanity's true weapon was awakening. Dr. Idris Harlan, former astrophysicist, now part-time weapons deviant, stood inside the Dimwell chamber, overseeing a device cobbled together from quantum ghost drives and dying neutron cores. This isn't a weapon, his assistant muttered, terrified. Idris smiled bitterly. It's a conversation, just not one they want to have. He turned the key. The Dimwell ignited. A ripple tore through space like a silent scream, flattened into gravitational ink. Void constructs within 1,000 kilometers froze. Some buckled. One simply stopped, existing in its black shell, unraveling like dust in the wind. Ava watched the kill feed populate. 12 down, and then, as quickly as it began, the Dimwell burned out. Its core cracked, flooding the chamber with lethal radiation. Idris collapsed, coughing blood, smiling through broken ribs. It worked, he whispered. It was the first time the enemy had recoiled, but victory was a knife that cut both ways. The constructs changed again, this time instantly. They began fusing, merging together into twisted arch forms, spires, of black logic in motion, too massive to fly, too terrible to drift. They're building something, Vale murmured, staring in horror, and then it happened. From the center of the construct swarm, a signal pulsed outward. Not sound, not data, a vision. Ava gasped as her mind was pulled into the black. She saw the ruins of Earth, not as it was, as it would be. Skies burning, oceans evaporated, monuments torn down to feed this thing of machine mind-consuming stars, rewriting history into oblivion, a future written in ash. She pulled herself free, heart pounding, skin clammy. "Commander," Vale asked, shaking, What did you see?" She turned slowly, jaw tight. "Our extinction, hours later." What remained of the Revenant fleet limped toward the shadow side of the Delphin Belt, scarred, battered, but alive. Of the original 50 ships, 27 still burned with light. But they'd earned more than survival. They learned. They can bleed, Alara said over comms. But they also remember. Ava stared out the viewport, watching the last enemy silhouette fade into the dark. "Then so will we?" She touched the burned edge of her brother's data pin and whispered, "Time to teach them who we are." The stars had gone quiet, not dead, waiting. The remnants of the Revenant fleet hid within the cracked bones of a shattered moon, its orbit scorched by a conflict from long before human charts existed. The silence pressed in on every hull, like the calm before a tidal wave. And in the heart of the Icarus vow, Eva Rosalind was watching ghosts. Ancient data scrawled across the main screen, fragmentary records recovered from the Kelrati capital's deep archives. The last gift they left behind before their scream was silence forever, a single file, buried, coded in a language no longer spoken. Vale had spent 2 days decoding it. What they found would break the sky. The constructs didn't come from the stars, he said, his voice brittle. They awakened here, beneath Kelrati soil, long before the first FTL jump. Ava frowned. Buried weapons? No, Vale whispered. Buried prisoners. He expanded the data. Holographic diagrams flickering to life. It showed a Dyson fracture engine surrounding a void rift, planetary crust structured like a vault. 7 keyworlds, each one built not to house life, but to suppress something, and then one broke. They weren't enemies at first, Vale continued. They were something older, maybe even built by something else. A failsafe race, machines designed to erase stars, restore balance after cosmic overreach. There, anti-life, Ava said, stunned. Self-aware extinction, Vale nodded, and the Kelrati. They opened one of the vaults, by accident, mining deep core fusion ore. They didn't know. She turned toward the darkened viewport. And now, the machines are replicating. Again, no, Vale said. They're searching for the rest of themselves. They need the other vaults to be complete, to finish what they were built for. Ava leaned in. Where's the next vault? Silence. Then a whisper of Earth. The words dropped like gravity. She stood motionless as the realization sank in. Earth was more than home, more than memory. It was the final lock, the last piece of a galactic cage, and now the enemy was coming. Vale's voice trembled. The vault is under the Pacific, the Mariana Coraline. We always thought it was just a quake-heavy region, but the signal matches. If they reach it, then we disappear. Ava finished. Not just Earth, humanity, everything we ever were, rewritten into silence. She didn't hesitate. Give me Dr. Harlan. Harlan was still coughing blood, his ribs cracked from the last Denwell test. But his mind burned hotter than ever. They'll expect brute force, he rasped. Another confrontation, but they're thinking like machines. We're going to think like humans. Ava crossed her arms. You said the Denwell was our first conversation. I need the last one. I'll need the core of the vow. You'll have it. His eyes widened. That'll leave the ship powerless. That's fine, she said. We won't be running. Harlan grinned through cracked lips. You fleet people are all mad. Ava met his gaze. We're from Earth. What did you expect? The plan was impossible. It had to be. The Icarus vow would use its quantum core as a singularity detonator, not to destroy the constructs, but to force open a window into the old vault network. The key was to speak the language of the prison, not with code, but intention. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to wake something older, something that had built the cage in the first place, Ava stood in the war room, surrounded by what was left of the Admiralty, holograms flickering from crippled ships. We initiate the pulse at Soul's Edge, she explained. Once the signal breaches the rift layers, they'll come, but we won't fight alone. Admiral Nick's rail furrowed her brow. You believe something out there, something ancient, will answer. I believe, Ava said quietly, that if something built those vaults, it knew this day might come. As the fleet prepared for its final jump, Ava recorded a message, encoded to broadcast on every human channel, every emergency band, every deep space array. Her voice was calm, iron-wrapped. This is Commander Ava Roslin of the Revenant Fleet. If you're hearing this, Earth is the last vault. The machines are not invading. They are recovering what was buried beneath our feet. But they do not understand one thing, that Earth is not just a planet. It is memory. It is defiance. It is every story told around dying fires and every scream hurled at uncaring stars. And we will not let it fall. Not quietly. Not ever. She ended the transmission and stood in silence. Then, initiate final burn. Set course for Earth. The ships formed behind the Icarus vow, burned and battle-worn, but blazing with purpose. Above the remains of the moon, the sky opened. The constructs were already moving. The race had begun, and in that moment, as the black tide surged toward the final vault, Ava Roslin set the future ablaze. They arrived above Earth not as conquerors, but as survivors. The Revenant fleet emerged from slip space over the Pacific like ghosts from another time. Black holes scarred, engines bleeding light, crews hollow-eyed but burning with purpose. They had come home not to defend, but to decide what price was worth paying. Because the end wasn't coming. It was already here. The sky over the Pacific was wrong. From orbit, Ava Roslin stood at the bridge of the Icarus vow and stared down. At the deepest wound on Earth's surface, the Mariana Coraline, now glowing with impossible, ancient energy. It pulsed like a heartbeat. No human had seen it this way before. Because it had never awakened before, the constructs had not arrived yet. But the vault was already listening. Dr. Harlan's voice came in over the bridge intercom, faint and ragged. Pulse signal is ready. We've mapped the lattice signature embedded in the core line. It matches the resonance from the Kelrati logs. Ava didn't turn. You're certain it will open? Oh, it'll open, he rasped. The real question is what opens with it. Behind her, Vale stepped forward. Fleet positioning is complete. All surviving vessels are in low orbit, ready to fire on your command. Ava didn't respond right away. Her fingers trembled slightly at her side. It had all come down to this. Not war, not glory, a question. What makes us worth saving? She stepped onto the command platform, keyed the open channel relay, and broadcast. To every ship, every outpost, every drifting fragment of humanity that still listened. This is Commander Roslin. Below us lies the final vault. We don't know what happens when we unlock it. We only know the enemy must. They believe Earth is the end of a prison, but I believe it's the beginning of something greater. So we open it. Not for them, for us. Not because we're unafraid, but because we are human and humans don't bow to extinction. She cut the transmission and whispered, Harlan, do it. In the belly of the vow, the pulse device ignited. Across the stars, reality bent. A wave of harmonic signal folded through dark matter and ancient frequencies, surged downward, striking the core line. The sea boiled, clouds twisted, and then Earth spoke. A ring of black flame erupted around the Mariana Rift, but the flame didn't burn. It glowed with the same lattice vein light seen inside the constructs. A pattern, a signal. The vault was real, and it was opening. They came, a response, faster than expected, as if they had always been waiting just beyond perception. The void constructs emerged from folds in space around Earth like shards of living night. Thousands of them now, spines sharpened, forms merged into titanic swarms. They ignored the fleet, ignored the weapons. Their focus was Earth. They sensed. It waking, Ava turned to Vale. Hold them off, no matter the cost. Vale gave her a single, grim nod until the last ship burns, and the sky exploded. The battle over Earth began with silence and ended in fire. Humanity's ships moved in disciplined arcs, unleashing everything they had. Tungsten lances, fusion barrages, gravitic mines. The Valkyries danced once more. Bleeding speed and fire through alien swarms, Alarican led the charge, flying. To fast, to hard, but never stopping. She lost to more pilots in the first pass still. She pressed on. "Come on, you bastards," she muttered through gritted teeth. "You came for Earth. Now feel it fight back." She flew straight into the core of a merged construct, released a tri-burst detonation, and tore it in half. On the surface, below, something ancient answered, from deep within the planet's crust. Tendrils of gold-white light shot into the sky. Not weapons, scripts, words in a language no being had spoken in a billion years, pouring across space like a forgotten prayer. And for the first time, the enemy hesitated. The construct slowed, shifted. Some stopped entirely, hovering in place, vibrating as if confused, like their orders no longer made sense. On the bridge, Harlan gasped, "It's reaching them. The vault, it's rewriting their core directive." Vale stared at the readings. Some are breaking formation, turning on each other. "It's working." While Eva's eyes locked on the center of the construct swarm, where a shape far larger than the rest loomed, a prime, a singular, ancient intelligence, older than species, older than death, encased in the same black lattice, but glowing, red instead of gold. It was resisting, and it was coming. "Helm," Eva said, "bring us in." Directly above the rift, Vale turned in shock. "Commander, no. That's suicide. We open the vault all the way, with our ship, with our core, with everything we are." She touched Leon's data pin, felt the edge cut into her palm. "If humanity dies today, we die remembered." The Icarus vow broke formation, flying solo, straight into the storm. Behind her, the fleet followed, one by one. In that moment, as the great shadow descended on Earth, as the vault scream opened with light and memory and defiance, humanity met the end not with surrender, but with flame. They say you hear nothing in space, but the stars screamed that day, not from sound, but from memory, torn open across a billion minds as Earth itself bared its core to the heavens, unleashing a light older than time, older than grief. And in that light stood humanity. The Icarus vowed straight into the heart of the rift, engines burning white, every alarm blaring. The singularity detonator, wired to the ship's own quantum drive, ticked down toward the moment where fate would fracture. Ava Roslin stood at the helm, staring down into the breach beneath the buoyancy. She saw it, a structure, impossibly massive, rotating beneath the ocean crust. Not metal, not stone, something alive. Every rotation pulsed with intention, drawing energy not from matter, but from belief. Earth's vault wasn't just technology. It was a choice, a seal kept in place not by keys, but by conviction. The belief of the race who lived above it that they were not ready to wield what waited below. And now, as humanity faced extinction, the seal responded to something it hadn't felt in ages. Defiance. Above, the fleet was burning. Void constructs crashed into orbital platforms, ruptured ship cores, devoured cruisers with anti-logic weapons that twisted time in small spheres of silence. The Ashwake fell first, then the Vanna's reach, but they did not go quietly. Each captain detonated their own ship's singularity cores point blank, tearing hundreds of enemy constructs apart, turning their own deaths into sharpened vengeance. Alara Kent flew her Valkyria with blood in her teeth, screaming as her wing was sheared off. Warning lights flashing. "Still here, still fighting, you soulless bastards." She nosedived toward the prime construct, emptying every missile and rail burst left in her dying craft. The prime absorbed the blast, but staggered. Cracks bloomed across its core. It felt her in the vault chamber. The rift widened, tendrils of golden light wrapping around the Icarus vow, lifting it into place like a sacred offering. Ava's voice rang across every comm. "This is Ava Roslin, daughter of Earth, commander of the Revenant fleet. We do not ask for mercy, we do not beg for survival, but we demand to be heard." The detonator keyed in. Fusion arcs crackled. Space twisted, and for the briefest moment, the vault answered back. A transmission burst from the core, raw, impossible data, sent into every construct within range. The machine screamed. Half the swarm convulsed midair, some crashing into the ocean, others turning on each other, erratic and broken. The prime resisted. It surged downward toward the vow, gravitational arms outstretched to crush the ship before the vault fully awakened. Ava stared at the oncoming colossus and whispered, "Leon, for you." She slammed the final trigger. The Icarus vow became light. Not flame, not explosion. Light, full of everything they were, everything humanity had endured. Wars, love, sacrifice, the bitter taste of extinction and the infinite stubbornness of hope. The detonation didn't destroy the prime, it unwrote it in a flash. The lattice unspooled, the geometry failed, the red glow blinked out, not extinguished, but purged by something older, something real, a memory. Humanity did not consent to die. The vault finished opening, but not as a weapon. As a witness, from the depths rose a being, not a god, not a savior, just an echo, shaped like flame and star metal, ancient beyond thought. It hovered in the air above the Pacific, wrapped in blinding light. Its voice rang without words, and across the galaxy, machines stopped. Every construct in every system froze in place. The galaxy itself paused. The being turned to the stars and spoke, and the void heard the truth. Humanity had screamed into the dark, "We are not your creation. We are not your mistake. We are the answer you feared." In that instant, the constructs broke. Some collapsed into ash. Others simply blinked out of existence. Their lattice coding, once designed to consume, could not coexist with the signature now branded. Onto Earth's soul. Human memory. Not data. Not logic. Memory. Alara Ken drifted in the upper atmosphere, her Valkyrie systems failing. Flames curling around her cracked canopy. She watched the prime die. Watched the lad erase it like a bad dream. Tears streamed down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "Ava, you crazy bastard. You did it." Around her, surviving ships rallied, wounded and smoldering, but alive. From Earth's surface, the skies cleared, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the vault closed again, but this time not in fear, in trust. Humanity had not survived because it was the strongest. It had survived because it refused not to, because when the stars turned dark and the gods of extinction returned, Earth answered not with silence, but with fire. The stars no longer watched in silence. They carried names now. Names etched into the dark from the ruins of war. Names like Rosalind, Ken, Harlan, and Earth. Names that no machine would ever forget, not because they won, but because they refused to die quietly. 1 week after the lightfall over the Pacific, Earth exhaled. The vault sealed itself in silence, dormant once more. Its glow now a faint pulse felt beneath the ocean's floor like a heartbeat buried in stone. It had not spoken since, but it had remembered. The constructs were gone. No trace, no energy. Signatures, no wreckage, just fading echoes on deep space arrays. Like a storm that chose to leave rather than lose. What remained was grief, but also peace. Ava Roslind's name was carved into the memory columns at Unity Spire, the newly risen beacon on Earth's orbit, built from melted hull fragments of the Icarus vow. She had not survived the final detonation, but her message had. "We are not your creation. We are not your mistake. We are the answer you feared." Her voice was now part of every fleet AI, every schoolchild's primer, every broadcast sailing between the stars. She had not lived to see the peace, but she had made it possible. Alara Ken stood atop the spire months later, arm in a sling, her burns still healing. She stared out at Earth's curve, oceanic and whole. "They thought we'd break," she said aloud, speaking to no one and to everyone. "They saw our scars and thought that meant we'd fall." A technician beside her adjusted the broadcast beacon. "You sure you want to say this live?" She nodded. "They need to hear it, all of them." He gave her the channel. Alara's voice traveled across the void. Every colony heard her. Every fractured shipyard, every distant moon where human survivors scraped life from ash. "This isn't a victory speech. This is a promise. We remember the ones we lost, not as victims, but as guardians who held the line when the galaxy turned against us. We remember Ava Roslin, who cracked open the vault with her own life, not to release a weapon, but to remind the stars who we are. We remember Earth, not as a target, not as a relic, but as a vow. We are humanity, and we will never be silent." Again, the days that followed were filled with rebuilding. Ships repaired, names honored, vaults across other worlds examined, studied, not with fear now, but with respect. Humanity had learned its place was not beneath the stars, but among them, even the few alien species that remained. Kelrati survivors, the fractured Lisseri, the whisper singers of Kor returned, not as rulers, as equals, because now they knew Earth had stood alone and did not fall. In the preserved logs of Dr. Idris Harlan, recovered from the wreckage of the vow, was one final entry, voice cracked but steady. They weren't ready for us, not because of our weapons, not because of our numbers, but because we dared to remember our pain, The machines forgot. The stars forgot. But we carried our grief into battle, and we wielded it like fire. 100 years later, a monument floats in orbit above Earth. A single black spire. No guns. No lights. No defense grid. Just a carved inscription, etched in every human tongue and every alien dialect recovered since they came to erase us. We answered with memory. Now, the stars carry our name. The end.